The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Montecito mansion, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Meghan Markle sat at her oak desk, her fingers hovering over her laptop keyboard. The Instagram logo stared back at her from the screen, a simple portal that had once connected her to millions of people around the world. It had been years since she last posted anything personal, years since she felt brave enough to speak directly to the public without layers of royal protocol or media handlers filtering her words. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harry. "How are you feeling about today?" he asked, knowing exactly what she was contemplating. They had discussed this moment for months, weighing the pros and cons of her return to social media. The decision hadn't been easy. Every public move she made was scrutinized, analyzed, and often twisted into something she never intended. Meghan closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about the woman she used to be before titles and tiaras complicated her life. She remembered the actress who posted behind-the-scenes photos from movie sets, the humanitarian who shared stories from her travels, the woman who believed in using her platform to inspire others. That woman felt like a lifetime ago, buried under years of criticism and carefully managed public appearances. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of Archie and Lilibet playing in the garden with their nanny. Harry had taken them outside deliberately, giving Meghan the space she needed to make this decision without distractions. He understood better than anyone the weight of returning to public life on her own terms. Meghan opened her laptop again and stared at the blank postbox. She had written and rewritten her message dozens of times over the past week. Some versions were angry, addressing the years of unfair treatment she had endured. Others were overly cheerful, trying too hard to project happiness. None of them felt authentic until she stopped trying to be perfect and started being real. She began typing slowly, each word carefully chosen but coming from her heart. The message wasn't about defending herself or making grand statements. It was about hope, about new beginnings, about the simple human desire to connect with others during a time of year when everyone was thinking about fresh starts. As she wrote about gratitude and growth, memories flooded back to her early days as a working royal. She remembered the excitement of using her platform to highlight important causes, the joy of meeting people whose lives had been touched by the charities she supported. She also remembered the crushing weight of constant criticism, the way every smile was analyzed for authenticity, every gesture interpreted as calculated. The years in California had given her perspective she never had before. Away from the fishbowl of royal life, she had rediscovered parts of herself that had been buried under public expectations. She had learned to parent without photographers hiding in bushes, to have dinner with friends without worrying about who might be listening at nearby tables. She had found peace in small moments that most people took for granted. But, with peace had come isolation. While she cherished her privacy, she missed the connection she once had with people who supported her humanitarian work. She missed being able to share moments of joy and hope directly, without them being filtered through tabloid interpretations or royal correspondents who never seemed to understand her intentions. The new year felt like the perfect time to bridge that gap. Not to return to the life she had left behind, but to create something new that honored both her need for privacy and her desire to make a positive impact. She wasn't naive about the response her return would generate. She knew there would be criticism, analysis, and probably conspiracy theories about her motivations. But she also knew there were people out there who had followed her journey with genuine support and understanding. Meghan finished her message and read it 3 times. It was honest without being bitter, hopeful without being naive, personal without being too revealing. She included a photo Harry had taken of her the previous evening, watching the sunset from their garden. In the image, she looked peaceful and genuine, not posed or artificial. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she wore a simple sweater and jeans. It was the kind of photo she might have posted years ago, before everything became complicated. Her finger hovered over the share button for several minutes. Once she posted this, there would be no taking it back. The comments would start immediately, the headlines would follow within hours, and the speculation about her motives would begin all over again. But staying silent felt worse than facing the noise. She thought about a conversation she had with her mother the week before. Doria had reminded her that she couldn't control how others interpreted her actions, but she could control whether those actions were authentic to who she was. "You've always been someone who speaks up for what matters to you," her mother had said. "Don't let fear of other people's opinions stop you from being yourself." The decision became clear in that moment. This wasn't about proving anything to critics or trying to rehabilitate her public image. It was about reconnecting with the part of herself that had always believed in the power of human connection and positive change. If she approached her return to Instagram with genuine intentions, the right people would understand. Meghan clicked the share button before she could second-guess herself again. The post went live instantly, joining the millions of New Year messages flooding social media that day. Within seconds, the first likes and comments began appearing. She closed her laptop quickly, not ready to read the responses just yet. She walked to the kitchen and made herself a cup of tea, her hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline of finally taking this step. Through the window, she could see Harry pushing Archie on the swing while Lilibet chased their dog around the garden. The sight reminded her why she had made this choice. She wanted her children to see her as someone who stood up for her beliefs, even when it was scary. Her phone began buzzing with notifications, but she ignored them. There would be time to read responses later, time to engage with the messages of support she hoped would come. For now, she wanted to sit with the feeling of having done something brave and authentic, regardless of how the world might react. The afternoon light shifted, and Meghan realized she had been sitting in the kitchen for over an hour, lost in thought. The house felt different somehow, as if posting that message had shifted something fundamental about her relationship with the outside world. She wasn't hiding anymore, wasn't letting other people's interpretations of her life define how she lived it. Harry came inside with the children, both of them grass-stained and happy from their morning in the garden. Archie ran to her immediately, wrapping his small arms around her waist and chattering about the butterfly he had seen near the roses. Lilibet followed, demanding to be picked up so she could tell her mother about the stick she had found that looked like a magic wand. As Meghan listened to their excited stories, she felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. She had spent so long protecting them from public attention that she had forgotten the joy of sharing simple moments of happiness. Her Instagram post wasn't about exposing her family to scrutiny again, but about modeling for her children the importance of staying true to yourself even when it's difficult. That evening, after the children were in bed, Meghan finally opened her laptop to read the responses to her post. The comments section was exactly what she had expected, a mixture of overwhelming support and harsh criticism. But something had changed in how she processed both types of responses. The supportive messages filled her with gratitude, while the negative ones felt less personal than they used to. She realized that the years away from public life had given her something more valuable than peace and privacy. They had given her perspective on what really mattered and the emotional strength to engage with the world on her own terms. She was no longer the person who needed everyone to like her or understand her choices. She was someone who could stand firm in her truth while remaining open to genuine connection with others. Harry joined her on the couch, reading over her shoulder as she scrolled through hundreds of comments. "Any regrets?" he asked softly, knowing how much courage this step had taken. Meghan smiled and closed the laptop. "None at all," she said, and meant it completely. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her voice, and it felt like coming home to herself. The decision to return to Instagram had been about more than just posting a New Year message. It represented her choice to engage with the world as the person she had become, rather than the person others expected her to be. She was ready to use her platform responsibly and authentically, knowing that her influence could make a positive difference in people's lives. As she got ready for bed that night, Meghan felt a sense of anticipation she hadn't experienced in years. She was no longer just reacting to what happened to her or hiding from public attention. She was actively choosing how to participate in the world, and that choice felt powerful and liberating. The new year had brought more than just a new calendar. It had brought the opportunity for Meghan to step into a new version of herself, one that honored her past experiences while embracing the possibility of positive change. Her return to Instagram was just the beginning of that journey, and she was ready to see where it would lead. The notification sound on Meghan's phone had been constant for 3 days. Her simple New Year message had exploded across the internet in ways she hadn't anticipated. What started as a personal moment of reconnection had become a global conversation about redemption, motherhood, and the power of authentic communication in an age of carefully crafted public relations. Sitting in her home office, Meghan scrolled through news headlines from around the world. Meghan Markle breaks social media silence with emotional return, read one from the BBC. Duchess finds her voice again, proclaimed another from a major American network. The coverage was surprisingly balanced, a stark contrast to the harsh treatment she had received in previous years. But it wasn't the media coverage that moved her most deeply. It was the thousands of personal messages from people whose lives had been touched by her words. A single mother in Detroit wrote about finding hope in Meghan's message about new beginnings after her divorce. A teenager in Manchester shared how seeing Meghan's authenticity had inspired her to start volunteering at a local food bank. A military wife in California explained how Meghan's words about resilience had helped her cope with her husband's deployment. Each message represented a real person who had taken time from their day to share something personal and meaningful. Meghan found herself responding to as many as she could, engaging in genuine conversations about hope, healing, and the power of small acts of kindness. This was exactly what she had missed most about having a public platform, the ability to connect with people who were working to make their communities better. Her friend Jessica Mulroney called that afternoon, excitement clear in her voice. "Meghan, do you realize what you've done?" she asked. "You've shown people that it's possible to come back from public humiliation with grace and purpose." The response has been incredible. Meghan appreciated her friend's enthusiasm, but she was more focused on the responsibility that came with renewed public attention. She had learned from her earlier experiences that influence could be a double-edged sword. This time, she was determined to use her platform more thoughtfully, more strategically, and with a clearer sense of her own boundaries. Harry found her that evening in their garden, sitting on the bench where she often went to think. The California sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, and the smell of jasmine filled the air. He sat beside her quietly, understanding that she needed space to process everything that had happened since her post went live. "I keep thinking about this message I received today," Meghan said softly. "It was from a woman in South Africa who said that seeing me speak openly about mental health struggles and finding hope again had helped her seek therapy for her own depression. She said she had been planning to hurt herself, but my words reminded her that difficult chapters don't have to be the end of the story." Harry took her hand, knowing how deeply these personal connections affected her. "That's exactly why you decided to come back," he reminded her. "Not for the headlines or the attention, but for moments like that." Meghan nodded, but she was also feeling the weight of expectation that came with such responses. People were looking to her for inspiration and guidance, and she wanted to be worthy of that trust without losing herself in the process. She had learned the hard way that trying to be everything to everyone was a path to personal destruction. Over the next few days, Meghan established a routine for managing her renewed online presence. She set specific times for reading and responding to messages, limiting her exposure to prevent the overwhelming feelings that had contributed to her mental health struggles in the past. She also made a conscious decision to focus on positive engagement, refusing to respond to inflammatory comments or get drawn into debates about her past decisions. The most surprising aspect of her return was the support she received from unexpected sources. Former critics who had written harsh articles about her in the past were now praising her authenticity and courage. Royal correspondents who had questioned her every move were acknowledging the grace with which she was handling her return to public life. But, perhaps most meaningful was the message she received from Catherine, the Princess of Wales. The two women had maintained a cordial but distant relationship since Meghan and Harry's departure from royal duties. Catherine's message was brief but warm. "Your words about new beginnings resonated with many people. Wishing you and your family peace and happiness in the year ahead." The gesture reminded Meghan that healing wasn't just personal, it could also extend to relationships that had been damaged by circumstances beyond anyone's control. She responded with equal grace, thanking Catherine for her kindness and expressing hope that their children might maintain the family connections that had been strained by adult complications. As the initial wave of attention began to settle, Meghan started thinking about how to use her renewed platform most effectively. She didn't want to return to the constant posting and engagement that had characterized her pre-royal social media presence. Instead, she envisioned using Instagram as a tool for highlighting causes and organizations that aligned with her values, sharing moments of genuine connection, and promoting positive change in ways that felt authentic to who she had become. She began reaching out to organizations she had supported in the past, many of which had suffered from reduced visibility during her years away from public life. A literacy program in Los Angeles that she had championed was struggling with funding. A women's shelter in London that she had visited as a working royal needed volunteers. A mental health initiative in Canada that she had supported was looking for ways to expand their reach. Meghan realized that her return to Instagram could be about much more than personal expression. It could be a way to amplify voices and causes that might otherwise struggle to find attention in an increasingly crowded digital landscape. She had the platform, now she needed to use it purposefully. Her mother visited that weekend, bringing the practical wisdom that had guided Meghan through many difficult periods in her life. Doria listened patiently as Meghan shared her plans for using her platform to support various causes, occasionally nodding or asking thoughtful questions about sustainability and long-term impact. "Remember what you learned in those years when you stepped back," Doria advised. "You discovered that your worth isn't determined by public opinion or media coverage. Don't lose that clarity just because people are saying nice things now." The advice was exactly what Meghan needed to hear. She had spent years learning to separate her sense of self from external validation, and she couldn't let positive attention undo that progress any more than she had let negative attention destroy her confidence. She began developing a content strategy that would allow her to engage meaningfully without becoming consumed by social media again. She planned to post regularly but not constantly, to share causes and organizations rather than focusing primarily on her personal life, and to maintain the boundaries that had protected her mental health during her time away from public life. The response to her second post, a simple photo of books she was donating to a local school library, confirmed that people were hungry for authentic content from someone they saw as genuine. The engagement was high, but, more importantly, the school received hundreds of additional book donations from people inspired by her example. This was exactly the kind of impact Meghan had hoped to achieve. She wasn't just building her own brand or seeking attention for its own sake. She was using her influence to create tangible positive change in people's lives. The literacy program received enough donations to expand into 3 new schools. The women's shelter was flooded with volunteer applications. The mental health initiative received funding to launch programs in 2 additional provinces. As January continued, Meghan found herself settling into a rhythm that felt both purposeful and sustainable. She was engaging with the world again, but on her own terms and with clear boundaries about what she would and wouldn't share. She was using her platform to amplify important causes while protecting her family's privacy. Most importantly, she was modeling for her children what it looked like to stand up for your beliefs while treating others with respect and kindness. The journey back to public engagement hadn't been easy, and Meghan knew there would be challenges ahead. Not everyone would support her choices, and there would inevitably be criticism and misinterpretation of her actions. But she was no longer the person who let other people's opinions determine her behavior or self-worth. She had returned to Instagram not to seek validation or rehabilitation, but to use her voice for positive change. And, in doing so, she had discovered that authentic communication could bridge divides, inspire action, and remind people of their shared humanity. The New Year message that had started as a personal moment of courage had become something much larger, a demonstration that it was possible to emerge from difficult experiences with wisdom, grace, and renewed purpose. The notifications on her phone still buzzed regularly, but now they felt like opportunities rather than burdens. Each message was a chance to connect with someone who needed encouragement, to support a cause that mattered, or to remind her followers that small acts of kindness could create ripple effects of positive change. Meghan had found her way back to the person she had always been at heart, someone who believed in the power of human connection to create a better world. Her return to Instagram was just the beginning of that renewed commitment to making a difference, one authentic post at a time. 3 weeks after her return to Instagram, Meghan stood in the kitchen of a community center in East Los Angeles, rolling up her sleeves to help prepare meals for families in need. The visit hadn't been announced to the media, and only a few staff members knew she was coming. This was exactly how she wanted to engage with her humanitarian work moving forward, with genuine connection rather than publicity seeking. The center's director, Maria Santos, had been running the food program for 8 years with limited resources and little recognition. When Meghan had reached out privately through her assistant, offering to volunteer and learn about their work, Maria had been skeptical. Too many celebrities had promised support only to disappear when the cameras stopped rolling. But Meghan arrived early that morning with her sleeves already rolled up, ready to work. She helped chop vegetables, packed food boxes, and listened as Maria explained the challenges facing their community. The conversation was honest and sometimes difficult, touching on immigration issues, poverty, and the complicated relationship between charitable organizations and the communities they served. "I don't want to be someone who drops in for a photo opportunity and then disappears," Meghan said as they worked side by side. "I want to understand what sustainable support actually looks like, even if it means admitting I don't have all the answers." This approach was fundamentally different from her earlier humanitarian work as a working royal, where visits were carefully planned and outcomes were often predetermined. Now she had the freedom to spend time learning before committing to action, to ask difficult questions about the most effective ways to help, and to admit when she didn't fully understand a complex situation. The families who came for meals that day had no idea that a former member of the British royal family was serving their food. Meghan wore simple clothes, tied her hair back, and focused entirely on making sure each person felt welcomed and respected. She learned names, asked about children's school programs, and listened to stories about job searches and housing struggles. One elderly woman named Carmen noticed something familiar about Meghan's face and asked quietly if they had met before. When Meghan gently confirmed her identity, Carmen's response surprised her. "Mija," she said, using the Spanish term of endearment, "I'm glad you're here helping, but I'm more glad you look happy. I saw you on the news before, and you looked so sad. Life is too short to let other people steal your joy." The simple wisdom struck Meghan deeply. Carmen didn't care about royal titles or media controversies. She saw a woman who was choosing to spend her time helping others, and that was enough. This interaction reminded Meghan why she had fallen in love with humanitarian work in the first place, the moments of genuine human connection that transcended social status or public perception. That afternoon, Meghan posted a photo from the community center on Instagram, but not one featuring herself. Instead, she shared an image of the volunteer schedule board, with names of community members who gave their time regularly to help their neighbors. Her caption focused entirely on their dedication and the center's need for ongoing support, directing followers to the organization's donation page. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the center's website had received more traffic than it typically saw in a month. Donations poured in from around the world, but, more importantly, dozens of local residents reached out to volunteer their time. The post had achieved exactly what Meghan had hoped, amplifying the work that was already happening rather than making herself the focus. Back at home that evening, Meghan reflected on how different this approach felt from her previous charitable work. During her time as a working royal, the focus often seemed to be on her presence at events rather than on sustaining long-term change. Photos were taken for official records, speeches were given to highlight issues, but follow-up was limited by protocol and scheduling constraints. Now she had the freedom to develop deeper relationships with organizations and to use her platform in more strategic ways. She could volunteer anonymously when appropriate, could support behind-the-scenes work that never made headlines, and could direct attention to local heroes who were making real differences in their communities. Harry encouraged her evolving approach to humanitarian work, recognizing how much more energized she seemed when she felt her efforts were making genuine impact. "You're not performing charity anymore," he observed one evening as they discussed her day at the community center. "You're actually doing the work, and it shows." The distinction was important to Meghan. For too many years, she had felt like her role was to bring attention to causes rather than to contribute meaningfully to solutions. Now she was developing skills and relationships that allowed her to be more effective as an advocate and volunteer. She began reaching out to other organizations, always with the same approach, offering to learn first, work second, and publicize only when it would genuinely help their mission. A teen mentorship program in Oakland taught her about the specific challenges facing young people aging out of foster care. An environmental justice group in Fresno educated her about the health impacts of agricultural pollution on farm worker communities. A domestic violence shelter in San Diego showed her how social media could be used to provide resources while protecting survivor safety. Each experience deepened Meghan's understanding of how complex social problems required nuanced solutions. She learned to ask better questions, to listen more than she spoke, and to recognize that her role was to support existing community leaders rather than to position herself as a savior or expert. This evolution in her approach was reflected in her Instagram content. Rather than posting frequently about her own activities, she developed a pattern of highlighting one organization each week, sharing their stories in their own words, and providing concrete ways for her followers to get involved. The strategy was working. Organizations reported significant increases in volunteers, donations, and awareness after being featured on her account. But, perhaps more importantly, Meghan was building relationships that extended far beyond social media. She stayed in touch with the people she met, following up on their concerns and celebrating their successes. When Carmen's grandson graduated from high school despite significant challenges, Meghan sent a congratulatory card. When Maria's community center received a major grant, Meghan called to celebrate the news. These gestures weren't publicized or documented for public consumption. They were simply expressions of genuine care and interest in people who had enriched her understanding of the world. The relationships felt authentic in a way that many of her previous royal interactions had not. One evening, as Meghan was responding to messages from organizations she had worked with, she received a video call from Princess Catherine. The conversation was initially formal, but Catherine's reason for calling soon became clear. She had been following Meghan's work on Instagram and wanted to discuss collaboration on a mental health initiative that both women supported. The conversation marked a significant shift in their relationship. Instead of navigating complex family dynamics and protocol requirements, they were talking as two women who shared similar interests in charitable work. They discussed strategies for using social media to reduce mental health stigma, shared insights about working with grassroots organizations, and even laughed about the challenges of meaningful humanitarian work in the age of Instagram. "I admire how you're approaching this," Catherine said honestly. "You're letting the organizations lead and using your platform to amplify their voices. It's something I've been thinking about for my own work." The conversation lasted over an hour and ended with plans to collaborate on a joint initiative supporting mental health resources in underserved communities. More importantly, it demonstrated that healing between them was possible when they focused on shared values rather than past misunderstandings. When Meghan shared the news of their collaboration with Harry, he was pleased but not surprised. "You're both committed to making a difference," he said. "Once you took the focus off everything else and put it on the work itself, connection was inevitable." The collaboration announcement, when it came several weeks later, was met with widespread approval. Media coverage focused on the substance of their mental health initiative rather than speculation about royal family dynamics. The joint Instagram post they shared, featuring young people who had benefited from mental health support programs, became one of the most shared posts on both of their accounts. For Meghan, the partnership represented more than just healing a personal relationship. It demonstrated that authentic commitment to humanitarian work could transcend personal conflicts and public pressures. When the focus was on helping others rather than managing public perception, even complicated relationships could find common ground. As February arrived, Meghan looked back on the month since her Instagram return with satisfaction and perspective. She had successfully rebuilt her public presence around genuine service rather than celebrity maintenance. She had developed meaningful relationships with organizations and individuals who were working to create positive change. Most importantly, she had found a way to use her influence that felt aligned with her values and sustainable for her mental health. The journey wasn't without challenges. There were still critics who questioned her motives, media outlets that preferred controversy to substance, and online trolls who targeted her regardless of her actions. But Meghan had learned to focus on the work itself rather than public response to the work. She measured success by donations generated for organizations, volunteers recruited for causes, and relationships built across communities. Her children had noticed the change in her energy and mood. Archie commented that his mother seemed happier when she came home from her volunteer work. Lilibet, though too young to understand the details, responded to her mother's increased confidence and joy. Harry observed that Meghan had found her way back to the person she was before royal life complicated her relationship with public service. Standing in her garden one evening, watching the sunset that had become her daily ritual for reflection, Meghan felt grateful for the journey that had brought her to this point. The years of criticism and withdrawal had been painful, but they had also taught her important lessons about authenticity, boundaries, and the difference between serving others and performing service for public consumption. Her return to Instagram had been about much more than social media. It had been about reclaiming her voice, rebuilding her public presence around genuine values, and demonstrating that it was possible to emerge from difficult experiences with wisdom and renewed purpose. She was using her platform not to rehabilitate her image, but to create meaningful change in the world. The sunset painted the California sky in brilliant colors, and Meghan smiled as she thought about the work waiting for her tomorrow. She would visit a school reading program in the morning, have lunch with organization leaders to discuss a new initiative, and spend the afternoon at home with her family. It was exactly the balance she had been seeking, a life that honored both her commitment to service and her dedication to the people she loved most. 6 months after her return to Instagram, Meghan found herself standing in the same spot in her garden where she had made the decision to re-engage with public life. The sunset looked remarkably similar to that evening in December when she had posted her New Year message, but everything else had transformed in ways she never could have anticipated. The wooden bench beneath the old oak tree had become her thinking spot, the place she came to process the remarkable journey that had unfolded since that first tentative post. What had started as a simple message about hope and new beginnings had evolved into something much larger, a demonstration that authentic engagement could create meaningful change and genuine healing. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the community center where she had been volunteering regularly. Maria Santos was sharing photos from their newest program, a job training initiative that had emerged from conversations between Meghan and local residents about long-term solutions to poverty. The program was entirely community-led, funded through donations that had poured in after Meghan featured the center on her Instagram, but sustained by local volunteers who had been inspired to get involved. This was exactly the kind of impact Meghan had hoped to create when she decided to use her platform differently. Rather than simply bringing temporary attention to causes, she was helping to build sustainable programs that would continue making a difference long after public interest moved elsewhere. The approach required more time and deeper engagement, but the results were transformative for the communities involved. The success had not gone unnoticed by other organizations or by fellow philanthropists who were rethinking their own approaches to charitable work. Meghan had received calls from celebrities, business leaders, and even government officials who wanted to understand how she had managed to create such genuine impact through social media engagement. She had been invited to speak at a conference on digital philanthropy, an opportunity that both excited and challenged her. The prospect of addressing an audience about her humanitarian work brought back memories of royal duties and the anxiety that had accompanied public speaking during that period. But she was no longer the same person who had struggled with those expectations. Standing at the podium in front of an audience of nonprofit leaders and social impact investors, Meghan spoke honestly about her journey. She shared the mistakes she had made in earlier attempts at public service, the lessons learned during her years away from public life, and the principles that now guided her approach to using influence for positive change. "The most important thing I learned is that authentic service requires humility," she said, her voice steady and confident. "It means admitting when you don't understand something, asking questions instead of making assumptions, and recognizing that your role is to support existing community leaders rather than to position yourself as an expert." The speech was met with a standing ovation, but, more importantly, it sparked conversations that continued long after the conference ended. Organizations began reaching out to Meghan not just for her platform or star power, but for her insights into building sustainable community partnerships. She found herself consulted on everything from volunteer engagement strategies to ethical approaches to using social media for fundraising. The transformation in how she was perceived professionally was matched by personal healing in unexpected areas. Her relationship with Catherine had continued to strengthen through their collaborative mental health work, leading to regular communication about their shared projects and occasional family video calls that included all the children. During one such call, Archie and his cousins played games while Meghan and Catherine discussed plans for expanding their mental health initiative. The conversation was easy and natural, focused on substance rather than protocol. When the call ended, Meghan realized she could barely remember why their relationship had been so complicated in the past. Harry had watched this evolution with quiet satisfaction, seeing his wife reclaim not just her public voice but her fundamental sense of herself. "You're not trying to prove anything anymore," he observed one evening as they walked through their neighborhood. "You're just being yourself and letting the work speak for itself." The observation was accurate and important. For years, Meghan had felt the need to justify her choices, defend her motivations, and constantly demonstrate her worth to skeptics. Now she was simply focused on doing work that mattered to her, sharing it authentically, and allowing people to judge for themselves whether they wanted to support her efforts. This shift had freed her energy for more creative and ambitious projects. She had begun working with a documentary filmmaker on a series about community-led solutions to social problems, highlighting the people doing transformative work in their neighborhoods. The project would feature stories from around the world, showing how ordinary people could create extraordinary change when given proper support and recognition. The documentary work reminded her of her early acting career, when storytelling had felt like a calling rather than just a profession. She loved the process of helping real people share their stories, of using narrative to help audiences understand complex issues, and of creating content that could inspire action rather than just entertainment. But perhaps the most meaningful development had been the impact of her journey on Archie and Lilibet. Her children had watched their mother navigate public criticism, rebuild her confidence, and create positive change through persistent effort and authentic engagement. They were learning lessons about resilience, integrity, and the importance of using privilege to help others. Archie, now old enough to understand some of what his mother did when she left for volunteer work, had begun asking thoughtful questions about poverty, education, and helping people in their community. He wanted to donate some of his birthday money to the reading program his mother supported and had asked if he could volunteer when he got older. Lilibet, though still very young, was absorbing the atmosphere of service and compassion that had become central to their family life. She played games about helping others, insisted on sharing her toys with children who had fewer, and seemed to understand intuitively that their family's good fortune came with responsibilities to help others. The children's responses confirmed for Meghan that her decision to re-engage publicly had been right not just for her own healing but for the values she wanted to instill in them. They were seeing her as someone who stood up for her beliefs, worked hard to make a difference, and treated everyone with dignity and respect. As summer approached, Meghan reflected on how drastically her relationship with social media had changed. Instagram was no longer a source of anxiety or pressure but a tool she used strategically and purposefully. She posted regularly but never compulsively, shared content that aligned with her values, and engaged with followers in ways that felt genuine rather than performative. The metrics that mattered to her had changed completely. Instead of counting likes or comments, she measured success by the number of volunteers recruited for organizations, the funds raised for important causes, and the relationships built across different communities. Her follower count had grown significantly, but, more importantly, her followers were actively engaged in the work she was highlighting. One evening, as she was updating her Instagram story with photos from a literacy event, Meghan received a direct message that stopped her completely. It was from a young woman in the UK who had been following Meghan's humanitarian work and had been inspired to start a mental health support group at her university. "Your posts about authentic service and community leadership gave me courage to stop waiting for someone else to create the program I knew we needed," the message read. "Our group has helped over 50 students in just 3 months, and we're expanding to other universities. Thank you for showing me that ordinary people can create extraordinary change." This was the kind of impact that made every challenge and criticism worthwhile. Meghan had inspired someone she had never met to take action that was improving real lives. The ripple effects of authentic engagement were creating positive change in communities around the world. She shared the message with Harry, who smiled as he read it. "This is what you were always meant to do," he said. "Not the royal duties or the celebrity appearances, but this, inspiring people to believe they can make a difference." As the sun set on another day of meaningful work, Meghan found herself back in the garden spot where she had first decided to return to public life. The decision that had felt so scary 6 months ago now felt like one of the best choices she had ever made. She had proven to herself and others that it was possible to engage with the world authentically while maintaining personal boundaries and protecting family privacy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maria at the community center. "The job training program graduated its first class today. 15 people are starting new careers next week. None of this would have happened without your support. Thank you for believing in our community." Meghan smiled as she read the message, then put her phone away to enjoy the peaceful evening. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to support important work, to amplify voices that needed to be heard, and to model for her children what it looked like to live with purpose and integrity. The journey back to public engagement had taught her invaluable lessons about the difference between authentic service and performative charity, between using influence responsibly and seeking attention for its own sake, and between building a sustainable public presence and burning out from trying to please everyone. Most importantly, she had learned that her worth was not determined by public opinion or media coverage, but by the positive impact she could create through consistent, thoughtful action. She was no longer afraid of criticism because she was confident in her motivations and clear about her values. As night fell over Montecito, Meghan felt a deep sense of gratitude for the difficult journey that had brought her to this point of clarity and purpose. The woman who had posted the tentative New Year message was still part of her, but she had grown into someone stronger, wiser, and more committed to using her platform for meaningful change. Her return to Instagram had been about much more than social media. It had been about reclaiming her voice, healing broken relationships, and demonstrating that authentic engagement could bridge divides and create positive change. She had found her way back to herself and forward to a future filled with purpose and possibility. The stars were beginning to appear in the California sky as Meghan made her way back to the house, where her family was waiting, and tomorrow's opportunities for service were already taking shape in her mind. She had successfully transformed from someone who felt victimized by public attention into someone who used that attention deliberately and thoughtfully to make the world a little bit better. Her story was no longer about surviving public scrutiny or defending past decisions. It had become about building bridges, creating change, and inspiring others to believe in their own power to make a difference. And that story was just beginning.